The accident Priya Sharma fumbled with her oversized portfolio case as she navigated through the crowded Chicago art fair. The late September wind whipped through the temporary pavilion, threatening to scatter her carefully arranged samples. She had invested her last 3 paychecks from Franklin High School, where she taught art to uninterested teenagers, into this booth, her one chance to get noticed in a sea of more established artists. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself. Adjusting the plastic container of indigo blue paint she was carrying to her demonstration table. The color was her signature, a special blend she had perfected over years of experimentation. Today was the day she would show the art world what made her different. The fair bustled with Chicago's elite art patrons, critics, and gallery owners. Priya's small booth was sandwiched between a celebrity photographer and an avant-garde sculptor whose pieces sold for more than her annual salary. She tried not to think about that as she prepared for her scheduled live painting demonstration. 15 minutes until you're on, Miss Sharma, called the event coordinator. Barely slowing down as she passed by with her clipboard, Priya nodded and turned to set down her paint container. But a sudden surge in the crowd pushed a tall man backward into her space. Her elbow jerked, the container lid popped off, and a wave of rich indigo blue splashed upward directly onto the man's immaculate light gray suit. "Oh my God," Priya gasped, watching in horror as the thick paint dripped down what was clearly an expensive Italian wool jacket. "I'm so sorry." The man turned slowly, and Priya's stomach dropped further. Even with limited interest in the business side of art, she recognized Julian West, owner of West Gallery, one of the most prestigious contemporary art spaces in North America. His expression was unreadable as he looked down at his ruined suit, then at the nearly empty paint container in her hand. The crowd around them fell silent. Someone snickered. Priya felt her career evaporating before it had even begun. "That's quite a color," Julian said finally, his voice surprisingly calm. He touched the paint with one finger, examining the hue. "Custom blend?" Priya blinked, thrown off by the unexpected response. "You call it Midnight Ocean? I've been developing it for years." Julian nodded thoughtfully, ignoring the growing stain. "Interesting depth to it. What's your name?" "Priya Sharma," she managed, her voice small. "I teach at Franklin High, and I do my own work when I can find time. This was supposed to be my demonstration piece." She gestured weakly to the half-prepared canvas on her table. To her surprise, Julian stepped closer to examine the preliminary sketch she had prepared. "Interesting composition. Ocean themes. Dreams, actually," Priya said, momentarily forgetting the disaster as she slipped into her element. "I explore the landscapes of subconsciousness, the places we visit when we're not awake to censor ourselves." Woman in a sleek business suit appeared at Julian's side, phone already out. "Mr. West, this is unacceptable. I'll call security." And Julian raised his hand, silencing her. "Olivia, please find me something else to wear and reschedule my next 2 appointments." He turned back to Priya. "I believe I've inadvertently disrupted your demonstration, Ms. Sharma. The least I can do is help you set up while my assistant handles this minor incident." Priya stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the anger, something that made more sense than this calm response. "But your suit is just fabric," Julian finished for her. "Your art, on the other hand, ... He gestured to her portfolio. "It seems far more interesting at the moment. May I?"
Yes.
As Olivia stalked away, clearly disapproving, Julian West, pain-stained and seemingly unbothered, began helping Priya arrange her space for the demonstration. The crowd, sensing the lack of drama, dispersed to other booths. "I don't understand," Priya said finally, watching this powerful man carefully position her brushes. "Why aren't you angry?" Julian smiled slightly, the first real emotion she'd seen on his face. "Ms. Sharma, in my experience, the most interesting stories begin with accidents. Now tell me about this technique you're demonstrating today." Somehow, standing beside a man who could have ended her career but chose curiosity instead, Priya began to talk about her art. The opportunity Julian West's paint-stained suit became something of a legend at the Chicago Art Fair. By evening, Priya's demonstration had drawn an unprecedented crowd, partly due to curiosity about the gallery owner who sat in the front row. Still wearing traces of indigo blue on his collar, despite changing into a spare shirt, "You've got something special," Julian told Priya, as they packed up her supplies after the fair closed for the day. The last of the attendees had filtered out, leaving them in the strange quiet of the dismantled exhibition space. "Your technique? With layering translucent colors, I haven't seen anything quite like it." Priya wrapped her brushes carefully, trying not to show how much his words affected her. "Thank you, but I'm sure you've seen much more impressive work in your gallery." "Different, not more impressive," Julian corrected. He leaned against the table, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes that seemed to evaluate everything as potential art. "West Gallery is hosting a special exhibition next month, Emerging Visions. I'd like you to be part of it." Priya nearly dropped her palette. "You're not serious." "I rarely joke about art, Miss Sharma." Handed her a business card thick, cream-colored stock with minimalist text. "Come by the gallery Monday morning. Bring your portfolio and any ideas you have for installation. We can discuss details then." Before she could formulate a response beyond stammering thanks, Julian was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of expensive cologne and paint thinner in his wake. Monday found Priya standing outside the imposing glass facade of West Gallery, in downtown Chicago, clutching her portfolio with white knuckles. The gallery occupied the ground floor of a renovated industrial building, its interior visible through floor-to-ceiling windows' stark white walls, its polished concrete floors, and strategic lighting that made even the empty spaces look intentional. "Must be Ms. Sharma," a voice startled her from her contemplation. Olivia, Julian's assistant, stood at the door with a tablet in hand and skepticism in her expression. "Mr. West is expecting you. Follow me." She led Priya through the main gallery, currently featuring an exhibition of architectural photography, and into a back hallway that opened into a surprisingly warm office space. Unlike the minimalist gallery, Julian's office contained overflowing bookshelves, a worn leather sofa, and walls covered with art that seemed more personal than prestigious. Julian rose from behind his desk, genuine pleasure lighting his features. "Priyome, I call you Priyo. Welcome to West Gallery." Over the next 2 hours, they discussed her work in detail. Julian asked questions that went beyond technique, probing the emotional architecture behind her pieces. He shared stories of artists he had discovered, his philosophy on contemporary art, and his vision for the gallery. "I started with nothing but a small inheritance and a passion for art that my father thought was completely impractical," he confided, pouring her a cup of tea from an elegant ceramic pot. "He wanted me in finance. Like him, we didn't speak for. Years after I opened my first tiny gallery space in a converted garage, my parents were the opposite," Priya found herself saying. "They immigrated here with dreams of artistic careers, but reality forced them into practical jobs. They encouraged my painting, but cautioned me to have a backup plan, hence teaching." Julian nodded thoughtfully. "And do you love teaching?" "Parts of it," she admitted. "Watching a student discover their creative voice is incredible. But the bureaucracy, the standardized curriculum that treats art as an afterthought." She trailed off, realizing she was perhaps being too candid. "That's why personal work matters," Julian said, understanding in his eyes. "It keeps your own voice from getting lost." The meeting evolved into lunch, then into a tour of the gallery spaces, including the room where Emerging Visions would be installed. Julian introduced her to his small staff curators-installers, marketing specialists treating her like a valued collaborator rather than a novice artist who had ruined his suit days earlier. "I'm thinking 4 or 5 of your pieces," he said, as they stood in the empty exhibition space, centered around that dream landscape concept, could create an immersive corner with the right lighting. Priya could almost see it, her work displayed in this prestigious space, her name on the gallery wall. It seemed impossible that a spilled container of paint had led to this moment. As Julian walked her to the exit, entered the gallery. His expensive watch and manicured appearance screamed money, but his eyes were cold as they flicked over Priya. "Julian, there you are. We have the investor meeting in 30 minutes. His tone suggested impatience with Julian's current company, Priya, this is Dominic Reed, my business partner, Julian said, a subtle shift in his demeanor. Dom, this is Priya Sharma, one of our featured artists for Emerging Visions. Dominic barely acknowledged her with a nod. The board wants to discuss the exhibition focus. Specifically, whether we're diluting the gallery's brand with too many unknown artists. An uncomfortable silence followed before Julian responded with quiet firmness. The meeting agenda was to discuss logistics, not reconsider our selected artists. The curation decisions are final. Dominic's smile didn't reach his eyes. Nothing's final until opening night. Julian, you know that. He nodded curtly to Priya. Miss Sharma. After he strode away, Julian turned to Priya with an apologetic expression. Don't mind Dom. He's brilliant with finances, but sees art primarily as investment vehicles. I promise your place in the exhibition is secure. Priya wanted to believe him, but Dominic's cold assessment had rekindled her insecurities. Are you sure I'm ready for this? There must be hundreds of artists more qualified. Art isn't about qualifications, Julian interrupted gently. About having something to say and finding your unique way to say it. You have both. He held her gaze until she nodded, then continued, I'll see you next week to review your selections for the show. As Priya left the gallery, clutching her preliminary exhibition contract, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had somehow shifted on its axisol because of a spilled container of paint, and the unusual man who had seen possibility rather than disaster in the accident. The complications October unfolded in a blur of preparation. Priya took a leave of absence from teaching, using her meager savings to focus entirely on creating new pieces for the exhibition. Her small apartment transformed into a chaotic studio, with canvases leaning against every wall and the scent of oils and turpentine permeating everything she owned. Julian visited weekly, bringing coffee and pastries, sitting for hours on her paint-splattered floor, discussing concepts and techniques. These visits became the highlight of her week's moments, when her artistic vision seemed to expand under his thoughtful questions and genuine interest. You're using more red tones here, he observed one afternoon, studying her latest piece, a dreamscape featuring a figure suspended between underwater depths and star-filled skies. It changes the emotional temperature of the whole series. Priya nodded, pleased he had noticed. I'm exploring the tension between comfort and growth. The blues represent familiar safety, while the reds are the discomfort of transformation. Leaving teaching to pursue art full-time? Julian asked perceptively. She hadn't told him about the resignation letter sitting in her desk drawer, waiting to be submitted once the exhibition secured her future. How did you know? Your work is becoming bolder, less concerned with pleasing an audience. His eyes held hers with unexpected intensity. It's beautiful to watch. Something shifted between them in that moment, the professional boundary blurring into something neither was ready to name. The gallery preparations intensified. Julian arranged interviews with local arts publications. Photographers came to document her work process. And social media teasers generated buzz about the mysterious dream artist featured in Emerging Visions. But behind the scenes, tensions simmered. Dominic Reed made his disapproval increasingly clear during planning meetings. The market is shifting toward minimalism and tech-integrated installations. He argued during a curatorial review, barely glancing at Priya's portfolio spread. Across the conference table, these dreamscapes are too traditional, too emotional for serious collectors. That emotional quality is precisely what makes them valuable, Julian countered, the muscle in his jaw tightening. Not everything needs to match current market trends. No, but everything needs to sell if we want to keep this gallery afloat. Dominic's words landed like stones. The Westbrook acquisition fell through last week. We can't afford sentimentality right now. Priya, sitting quietly at the corner of the table, felt the weight of being a liability. Later, she cornered Julian in his office. If my work is putting the gallery at financial risk, it's not, Julian interrupted firmly. Dom exaggerates our challenges to push his agenda. He wants more corporate-friendly art that appeals to investment portfolios rather than souls. He ran a hand through his usually immaculate hair, revealing rare frustration. This has always been our fundamental disagreement. But the pressure mounted from other directions too. Livia began scheduling Julian for more investor meetings and fewer studio visits. Critics who previewed the exhibition concept published mixed reviews, questioning whether Julian West was losing his edge by featuring unknown educators rather than established artists. One evening, working late at the gallery to finalize installation, Priya overheard a heated argument from Julian's office. "You're compromising decades of reputation building for a crush." "Julian," Dominic's voice carried through the door. "The board is concerned. I'm concerned. Ever since you met this teacher, your judgment has been clouded. My judgment is perfectly clear," Julian responded, his normally controlled voice tight with anger. "Priya's work stands on its own merits. The fact that I admire her as a person is irrelevant." "Is it because the staff is talking? The artists are talking. Everyone sees how you look at her, how you've restructured this entire exhibition too. Feature her work prominently." Priya stepped back, cheeks burning, not wanting to hear more but unable to unhear what had already been said. She slipped out of the gallery, ignoring Julian's call to her retreating form. The next day, she received an email from the Franklin High principal Anne, unexpected opportunity to lead a prestigious international exchange program for young artists. In Florence, starting immediately. It would mean leaving Chicago, abandoning the exhibition, walking away from whatever complicated thing was developing between her and Julian. When he called that evening, she let it go to voicemail. When he texted asking to meet, she responded with a formal message about needing space to reconsider her participation in the exhibition. The night before the final installation was to begin, Priya sat surrounded by her canvases, staring at the Florence offer letter and a half-packed suitcase. Her phone lit up with Julian's name for the 20th time that day. This time, against her better judgment, she answered. "Priya." His voice sounded rough, as though he hadn't slept. "Please don't make any decisions yet." "Whatever you overheard, it wasn't just what I overheard," she interrupted. "It's everything. Your gallery is struggling because of me. Critics are questioning your judgment. And now there are rumors about us that undermine my credibility as an artist." "Since when do you care about rumors?" he challenged. "The woman who creates fearless explorations of the subconscious is worried about gallery gossip?" "About fear?" she insisted, though it partly was. "It's about clarity. I've been offered a teaching position in Florence, a fresh start." The silence stretched between them before Julian spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. "I see. You've decided to take it." Priya looked at her paintings, the most honest work she'd ever created then. At the acceptance letter that offered a safe retreat from complications and potential heartbreak. "I think it's for the best," she said finally. "For both of us." The separation, the Florence Art Academy welcomed Priya with open arms and a charming apartment overlooking terracotta rooftops. Winter in Italy brought misty mornings and golden afternoons that transformed the ancient city into a living painting. She should have been inspired. Instead, she felt hollow going through the motions of teaching talented international students, while her own creativity languished. Her phone contained dozens of deleted drafts of messages to Julian explanations. Apologies. Confessions she couldn't bring herself to send. She had left so abruptly, passing her completed works to Olivia with a clinical note about installation preferences, then boarding a plane before the exhibition even opened. "Your students adore you," remarked Valentina, the program director, over espresso one afternoon. "But there is sadness in your eyes, Kara. You left something important behind in America, no?" Priya deflected the observation with a smile and changed the subject. But later that night, she finally succumbed to curiosity and searched online for news of emerging visions. The exhibition had opened without her, generating considerable press, most of it focused on Julian's apparent professional crisis. West Gallery's latest exhibition signals changing direction, read one headline. Julian West defends controversial curatorial choices, declared another. The accompanying photo showed Julian at the opening reception, impeccably dressed, but with shadows under his eyes as he stood beside her paintings. Despite the critical reception, her work had sold all of it, according to the gallery website. The knowledge should have brought satisfaction, but instead left her feeling more adrift. 6,000 miles away in Chicago, Julian faced his own form of exile. The Emerging Visions exhibition had become a flashpoint for larger conflicts within the gallery. Dominic had used the mixed critical reception to convince board members that Julian's curatorial vision was becoming too personal, too disconnected from market realities. "They're talking about restructuring," Olivia informed him one snowy February morning, sliding a document across his desk. "Dominic wants to create a separate investment division that would have final approval over exhibition selections." Julian stared at the proposal, recognizing it for what it was, a sophisticated power grab that would effectively end his artistic autonomy. "This would transform us into an art investment bank, not a gallery." He's arguing that it's necessary for survival. Olivia hesitated before adding, "The Morgenstern collection is considering pulling their support after this exhibition." The Morgenstern family had been Julian's earliest patrons, their backing essential to the gallery's founding. Losing them would be both a financial and personal blow. That evening, stayed late, wandering the gallery spaces after everyone had left. He paused before the wall where Priya's paintings had hung, though other works now filled the space. He could still see her dreamscapes, the way they had transformed this room with their luminous depths and emotional honesty. His phone contained her number, unchanged since she left. He had stopped calling weeks ago, respecting her silence as an answer in itself. But tonight, facing the potential loss of everything he had built, he found himself craving her particular perspective, the way she cut through pretense to the heart of things in Florence. Priya's phone rang at an odd hour. Seeing Julian's name on the screen sent her heart racing, but when she answered, his voice was formal, almost businesslike. "I apologize for calling so late," he began. "I'm researching international exhibition opportunities and remembered your connection to the Florence program." Priya leaned against her kitchen counter, trying to match his detached tone. "Of course. What would you like to know?" They spoke for 20 minutes about the technical aspects of Italian arts. Programming a conversation so deliberately impersonal, it almost hurt more than no contact at all. As the call wound down, an uncomfortable silence fell. "How are you?" Julian Priya finally asked, unable to maintain the pretense. "Really?" The facade cracked slightly. "The gallery is changing, not necessarily for the better." He paused. "Your work made an impact, though. All 5 pieces sold to a single collector." "I saw the reviews," she admitted. "I'm sorry if I caused problems." "You didn't." His voice softened momentarily before returning to its professional cadence. "The problems existed long before you arrived. Your work simply brought them to the surface." Another pause, and Florence. "Is it everything you hoped?" Priya gazed out at the city lights, the dome of the cathedral illuminated against the night sky. "It's beautiful. The students are wonderful." All true statements that completely avoided the question. Julian seemed to understand the evasion. "I'm glad," he said simply. "I should let you go. Thank you for the information." After they disconnected, Priya opened her sketchbook for the first time in weeks. Instead of her usual dreamscapes, she began drawing angular lines that gradually resolved into the distinctive silhouette of West Gallery against the Chicago skyline in Chicago. Julian sat in his darkened office, holding a formal notice of board. Review scheduled for the following months, essentially a hearing to determine whether he would retain creative control of his own gallery. On his desk lay a dog-eared catalog from the International Milan Art Expo, open to a page advertising their emerging artist showcase. Both alone in different cities, they began making plans neither was ready to share with the other. The canvas reunited Brill in Milan, brought unpredictable weather and the controlled chaos of the International Art Expo, a prestigious gathering of galleries, artists and collectors from around the world. Priya arrived early on opening day, her portfolio clutched tightly as she navigated the massive exhibition center. The Florence Academy had nominated her for the Emerging Global Voices Showcase, an unexpected honor that had reignited her creative passion over the past month. She had produced a new series of paintings that evolved her dreamscape concept, incorporating architectural elements inspired by her time in Italy. The work felt more mature, more intentional than anything she had created before. As she checked in at the artist registration desk, a familiar voice behind her caused her heart to stutter. The lighting in Hall C is completely inadequate for the west-facing installations. Can we get additional spots before the preview reception? Julian stood several feet away, deep in conversation with an expo coordinator, his attention focused on a floor plan spread between them. He looked thinner than she remembered, the angles of his face more pronounced, but still moved with the same purposeful energy that had first impressed her. Before she could decide whether to approach him or slip away unnoticed, he glanced up. Their eyes met across the crowded lobby, and for a moment, everything around them seemed to still. Julian excused himself from the conversation and walked toward her, his expression carefully neutral. "Priya, I didn't realize you were exhibiting last minute." "Nomination," she explained, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You didn't mention you'd be here when we spoke." "Last-minute decision," he echoed with the ghost of a smile. "West Gallery has a small showcase in Hall B." An awkward silence fell before they both spoke at once. "How have you? I wanted to." They stopped. The familiar rhythm of their conversations both remembered and lost. "Your hair is different," Julian observed. Gesturing to the shorter cut she had adopted in Florence, Priya touched it self-consciously. "Italy changed me in small ways and in larger ones," he asked the question, holding more weight than its simple words suggested, before she could answer. They were interrupted by a harried expo assistant informing Priya that her installation space was ready for setup. Julian nodded in understanding. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation later? The preview reception tonight?" suggested. Priya agreed before being whisked away to her designated area, her mind spinning with awe. The things left unsaid between them. The day passed in a blur of installation, details, and technical adjustments. By evening, the expo transformed into a glittering social event. With champagne flowing and the art world elite moving from exhibit to exhibit in a sophisticated dance of appreciation and acquisition, Priya's showcase drew steady attention. Her mind remained distracted, scanning the crowds for Julian. When she finally spotted him across the hall, he was engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion with none other than Dominic Reed. The sight of Julian's business partner sent a chill through her. She hadn't expected him to be in Milan, and his presence complicated the tentative hope she'd been nurturing since their morning encounter. As she watched, the conversation between the two men grew visibly heated. Julian turned away abruptly, only to find himself face-to-face with a striking older woman whose commanding presence drew attention from those nearby. Even from a distance, Priya could see Julian's demeanor change, showing respect tinged with what looked like resignation. "That's Eleonora Morgenstern," murmured a nearby artist, following Priya's gaze. "The matriarch of Chicago's biggest art patrons. Rumor has it she's shopping for a new gallery to support after pulling funding from West." Priya felt her stomach drop. The Morgensterns withdrawing support would be devastating for Julian's gallery. Was that what he had meant by changes during their phone call? Without fully forming a plan, Priya found herself moving through the crowd toward them. Julian caught sight of her approach, surprise, and something like warning in his eyes. "Morgenstern," Julian was saying, "allow me to introduce Priya Sharma, an extraordinary artist currently based in Florence." The elegant older woman turned appraising eyes to Priya. "Ah, the dream painter. I viewed your work in Chicago. Unconventional emotional landscapes, not typically my preference, but undeniably compelling." "Thank you," Priya responded, gathering her courage. Mr. West has an exceptional talent for recognizing authentic voices, even when they don't align with current trends or investment patterns. Eleonora's eyebrows rose slightly, a bold statement from a newcomer to our world. Bold, just honest," Priya continued, aware of Julian's cautioning glance but unable to stop. "Art that prioritizes safe investment returns might appreciate in value, but art that prioritizes emotional truth appreciates in meaning. The former fills vaults, the latter fills souls. West Gallery has always understood the difference." A tense silence followed before Eleonora Morgenstern's expression shifted into something resembling amusement. "Well articulated, Miss Sharma. She turned to Julian. Your artist speaks with the same conviction I once heard from a young gallery owner, who insisted that profit should follow passion, not dictate it. She glanced meaningfully toward Dominic, who hovered nearby. Perhaps we should revisit our discussion about the Morgenstern Fund's direction, Julian. My office, when you return to Chicago. After she departed, Julian stared at Priya with a mixture of astonishment and something deeper. You shouldn't have done that. Probably not, she agreed. Did I make things worse? Not sure yet. His expression softened, but it was reminiscent of how we met, creating beautiful chaos that forces me to see things differently. They found a quiet corner away from the main reception, where months of distance and misunderstanding began. To dissolve an honest conversation, I nearly lost the gallery, Julian admitted. Dominic leveraged my focus on your exhibition to convince the board I was no longer objective. The Morgensterns withdrawing support was the final blow. This showcase was my last attempt to prove my vision still has value. And I ran away when things got complicated, Priya acknowledged. I convinced myself I was protecting your reputation, but really I was protecting myself from potential disappointment. Julian reached across the small table between them, his fingers lightly touching hers. I never explained why I wasn't angry about the paint that day at the fair. His eyes held hers. My entire career has been about recognizing the moment when something genuine appears in art or in life. The moment you spilled that paint, embarrassed but still passionately explaining your technique, I recognized something real. Priya turned, her hand to clasp his. Florence taught me that I can succeed as an artist, but it also showed me that success feels empty without the right people to share it with. As the evening wound down, they walked together through the nearly empty exhibition halls, stopping before each other's showcases to truly see the work they had created during their months apart. Your new pieces have evolved, Julian observed, studying her latest dreamscapes with their architectural elements. There's a structure to the emotion now, a framework that actually enhances the feeling rather than containing it. Priya nodded, then gestured to his gallery's exhibition, a carefully curated collection, featuring emerging artists from diverse backgrounds, and you've created a more coherent narrative across different artists. It's like you found a way to tell a collective story while preserving individual voices. They paused before a small painting in Julian's showcases. Miniature recreation of Priya's indigo blue paint spill, rendered as an abstract cosmos, signed with Julian's initials. You painted this? She asked, surprised by the revelation that he created art himself. Some accidents deserve to be commemorated, he replied with a smile, especially ones that change your life. Outside the expo center, Milan sparkled under a canopy of stars. They stood close, neither quite ready to say good night. I return to Chicago tomorrow, Julian said finally. The Morgenstern meeting will determine whether West Gallery continues as I envisioned it or becomes something unrecognizable. My Florence contract ends next month, Priya offered. I've been considering next steps. The question hung unspoken between them until Julian gave it voice. Would those steps possibly lead back to Chicago? Priya looked at this man who had seen possibility in disaster, who had fought for his vision despite considerable pressure, who had somehow become inextricably woven into her concept of both art and home. I think they might, she said softly, though I'd need a good reason to return. Julian's hand found hers again, their fingers intertwining like complementary colors blending on a canvas. I believe I could offer several compelling reasons. As they walked together through the Milan night, discussing possibilities for collaboration that transcended professional boundaries, both recognized that the most beautiful works of art lives often begin with unexpected accidents and the courage to see where they might lead in the moment their paths had first crossed. Amid spilled indigo paint and initial embarrassment, neither could have imagined the canvas they would eventually create together, one painted with honesty, resilience, and the particular shade of blue that had colored their world in ways neither could have foreseen.